please.
Okay.
So, hey everybody, my name's John Cavelli. Welcome to Trombone Is Enough, and I'm really pleased to introduce my guest, Megan Boutin. Say hello, Megan.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for doing this. It's a relatively new webcast that I'm doing, but I'm interviewing trombone players, trying to learn about their origins and influences, and just really excited that you said yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks very much. You are a doctor.
I am a doctor of trombone. Yeah, I did.
Cool.
Yeah, I did my my undergrad at Ithaca College with Hal Reynolds. I did my master's at Eastman School of Music with Mark Kellogg, and I did my DMA at University of Texas at Austin with Nat Brickens.
So that's what it's called, a DMA.
A doctor of musical, doctor of musical arts. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not necessarily doctor of trombone.
No. I was just being a little silly, but it's my degree is in trombone performance.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering about what the emphasis, the ratio is to musicology studies, academics versus performance on the instrument, and whether or not someone who might not be an instrumentalist still has a chance in getting a doctorate in musical studies.
Absolutely. So, the performance, getting a doctorate in performance, the ratio of academics to performance really depends more on the program. A program like at Indiana University is rather academic. A typical doctoral degree in performance might take 3 or 4 years. Others that are more academic might take more like 4 or 5. So typically, where I did my degree at UT Austin, the performance degree is quite performance oriented. Most of your credits are in performing, but you do need to go through all of the. You do need to make sure you complete your very high level history and theory. But there's not a huge academic component, but it depends on the program. For example, at UT, my sort of the big projects along the way were, let's see, I had to do 4 recitals. I had to do 2 solo recitals, a chamber recital, and then a lecture recital. And the lecture recital is like an hour-long presentation and performance. And at some places you might do more of a scholarly, like your scholarly document that goes along with that might be a bigger deal. At other places it might just be more performance-based. I sort of ended up doing a lot more than I probably needed with my scholarly document. My doctoral topic was on alto trombone and the works of Michael Haydn. I did a lot of research about that, and I basically performed and presented I think 3 pieces by him, and performed and discussed like the history of the instrument and the history of Haydn, and so I ended up with a pretty significant document, like a 90-page document. Yeah. So, but it's not always that academic, or it can be a lot more academic. It really just depends on the program. But as far as like, that's just the performance degree. There are, of course, you can get doctoral degrees in theory, in musicology. So yeah, it just depends on your particular area.
And your master's was in trombone?
Yeah, my master's was also in performance. So that was mainly just playing trombone all day, every day. And of course getting through your history and your theory classes. And then my undergrad was actually in music education, though. So yeah, so I taught for a year after I graduated. So I did music ed as an undergrad, learned how to play all the instruments, learned all of the pedagogy, all of those things. And then I taught at a K through 6 school It's a very tiny little school district, so it's K through 6 and then 7 through 12. I think there were like 10 kids, in the band, and I started maybe 50 kids, so I had like 60 kids in band total, and I also taught first grade and kindergarten general music that year, so it was an experience.
That's like a big
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, it was an experience. And me, all the while, I was also playing with an opera company that year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What kinds of operas were you playing?
So the opera company I played with was Tri-Cities Opera. I graduated in May. I took that audition, I think probably in sometime around May, and I got won the job. Tri-Cities Opera is based in Binghamton, New York, so about an hour from Ithaca. And my job was sort of in between Ithaca and Binghamton. So I was teaching and then playing with the opera company. The first opera I ever did was Mozart's Don Giovanni, which, for people who aren't familiar with the opera, the trombones play about 8 measures, a very important chorale. They play 8 measures about an hour into the opera. And then we sit around for another 45 minutes, and then we play the finale, and that's it.
So would you say, did you play any Puccini?
I must have. I don't remember everything that I know. Let's see. I know I did get to do Carmen. I know I did Donizetti, Elixir of Love. I don't remember all the operas at this point. Yeah.
Well, I think what I probably should have asked instead was other eras use trombones more? Or?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, certainly. I mean, if you think about the operas of Wagner, that's very brass heavy and a lot more, I'm not super versed in contemporary operas, but certainly there are some really good brass parts in opera. Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you come from a high school program where you played in band and orchestra, or one or the other?
My high school program, so I grew up in Maine, and my high school had, just one band director, and I think we had regular band, and then I think we had a wind ensemble. And you played in both. If you were in wind ensemble, you played in both because we needed people. We didn't really have that big of a band. I didn't have a very strong band program.
Were you pretty advanced for the rest of the group?
Yeah, so my junior year, I think for all state, I think I was first in the state junior year and senior year. Now, that is, but I was also, so actually, just to kind of finish up with your question about band and orchestra, I played in a youth wind ensemble and also a youth orchestra. I had to drive about an hour to go do that, but I did that for, I think, 4 years I played in wind ensemble, and I think for 2 years I played in orchestra. So I did get that experience in high school, but not at my school. Now, that whole being first in the state thing, there's a sort of asterisk to that because it's Maine, and the level of Maine All-State is very different than, say, Texas All-State, where I am now. So when I was like, wow, I'm first in the state. This is really exciting. I worked really hard and I practiced. And then I went to Ithaca, and my freshman year, you have band auditions for placement to see which band you're going to be in. And I was second to last out of everybody.
Oh
yeah, I was like, out of like 20 something, I was like second to last. I was just thought, okay, I have some practicing to do.
I'm wondering if you could expand on what your feelings were at that moment when you learned that ranking.
Yeah. It was hard to sort of have that shock of thinking like, wow, I am not good compared to all these people there. But I didn't feel disheartened, I think, actually, because I think I was just so excited to be at school, at college, doing music. And I just felt it actually made me really motivated just to practice. That's what it probably hurt a lot more than I remember. Like in the moment, it probably hurt a lot.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, I think what I took away with it and how I ended up sort of reacting to that and the actions I took after that was I was just really motivated to practice. It just made me want to play my horn all the time and get better. And I did, by my second year, I think I was like either first or second in the studio.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you know what to practice to get better? Or did you have a really good teacher, or were you just left on your own to figure out what you needed to do working?
A little bit of all of those things. I did have a really good teacher. Hal Reynolds was just a wonderful person. So incredibly warm and generous with his time. Very funny. He always had a joke. And actually those Peterson duets that we had talked about, that's where I know those from, because he would always play those duets. So every lesson we would play a duet. A lot of times it was, Rochus or Bordonis, but every lesson he would always play a duet. So he was just such an incredibly supportive and just like warm and encouraging person. Like every lesson just felt so, you just felt so supported and encouraged. Did I know how to practice? No. But I knew that I needed to practice a lot. So I think, part of it was just putting in the time. And, realizing that like I need to practice things like scales. I need to work on playing with a tuner. I need to play with a metronome.
That's really good stuff to mention, because playing with a tuner, playing with a metronome, those are the things we learn along the way if we really want to get on point. So, but for me, I've been challenged to not be sure what to be practicing. How would you say your practicing has evolved since childhood up into where you are now?
Yeah. Oh man, it has changed so much, and it has changed, I think, much, much more. Really, since I finished school, like I graduated. I took a bunch of time off, and so I graduated in 2018 with my DMA. So it took me a little while longer. I had a lot of time in between the year of teaching, and then I also taught private lessons in the Austin area. That was a big part of why my practice changed, was teaching lessons. That was huge, especially teaching beginners. I think the biggest thing that has changed for me in practicing has just been that I practice fundamentals way more. Way more. Practicing, there's always something to practice. Like there's always some gig coming up, or some performance that I have to do, or something. And so there's always rep to practice, or an audition or something. But I think the biggest thing was learning how to take the challenges that I have in my music, something that's hard, something that doesn't work well, something that it doesn't feel right, and then learning how to work on that in my fundamentals, and trust that fundamental process, and just tailor what I'm doing in my fundamentals to what I need to work on a regular basis.
Did you record yourself and listen back, or was that not part of it?
Well, that's evolved a lot. When I was a student, hardly ever. Oh my gosh. The first time I was ever, I didn't record myself ever in high school. I just didn't know to. Nobody told me to. I didn't know you could. I didn't know that was a thing. Of course, we didn't have, phones like that we could just throw in our stand and record from. I didn't have a device. I didn't know what to do. So the first time I was ever recorded, I totally cried. It was awful. It was like, terrible. I felt awful about myself. But then, so I sort of had this aversion to doing it, because it's hard. It's hard to listen to yourself. I think in my master's is when I really started doing it. When I was taking a lot of auditions, I started recording, because you get to a point where you're like, I need to get better, and I need to hear things that I can't hear, or I can't focus on when I'm playing. Now I record myself constantly. I just throw my phone on the stand, and like every day I just hit record, and I do it with video also. I think that's really important.
Why? What are you looking for on the video?
A lot of things are just sometimes nothing in particular, but sometimes it's like, am I doing something weird with my embouchure? What little habits am I doing that I don't notice? How's my arm looking? What kind of tension is in there? Yeah, sometimes am I just standing funny? Am I breathing funny? Like what? Just little things that we don't notice. I mean, when I tell my students to record a video, I tell them to think about it like this: if they were in a lesson with me and I didn't look at them and I just stared at my computer or something, like that would be very weird. There's a lot of information we get from seeing what we do. So yeah, I constantly record myself now, and it'll just be like 20-second clip of these 5 measures or these 15 measures or 50 measures or whatever it is, and then just listen back. But I used to sort of record myself as thinking like, okay, I'm going to record myself and it has to be polished and good, and then I'll go back later and listen to it and I'll like sit down. Now I just like so much more beneficial just to record, listen back, and then you're constantly just in a sort of a feedback loop, and it's so much more beneficial.
Right. Yeah. When you go back and listen to yourself now, for example, the recitals that posted on your website, you ever go back and check them out? So what do you think?
Oh, so those kinds of recordings that are sort of more formal, either like a recording session where I've recorded something that's, I did it in multiple takes and, maybe edited. I don't, actually I don't have any that I've really done any serious editing on. They've all just been like one and, either, full takes. But anyways, or like a recital. It kind of depends. Like, if I've recorded something that I'm going to submit and I've like intentionally made it as clean as possible and done it in multiple takes, I'm listening back throughout the process, and then once it's done, it's kind of like sent out into the world. And maybe I'll go back and listen just to kind of be like, oh yeah, that was a couple years ago. Let me hear what it sounded like. Or live recital recordings. I tend to give those a couple of days after a recital, or maybe a week. Let it settle, and then I'll go back and listen, and then I'll just let it sit, and then maybe I'll come back to it again just for interest, or sometimes it's interesting to go back after a year or two and kind of hear things that we didn't hear then, and it's good to hear. It's kind of nice because you can hear progress happening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
What do you think? When did you
gosh, I played trombone in 5th grade because that's when I started band. So my brother is 2 years older than me, and there were 2 boys that lived up the street that were brothers that were also older than me. One was my brother's age, and one was 8 years older. So there were 3 of them that were older than me, and they all, for some reason, picked trombone. And so my band teacher in elementary school happened to be a woman and a trombone player. And my best friend at the time, and I don't know if our band teacher sort of encouraged us to, or if my best friend just wanted to, or if it was like the boys are doing it, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it better than them. But yeah, I those were all sort of things that were happening at the time, and yeah.
I'm curious about was it weird at the time that there was a woman and instructor that also played trombone? Has there been an issue at all, or has it changed over time?
So as far as my band director goes, because we were still in elementary school, I think it's much more common to have female elementary school music teachers than male, as far as I've seen, as far as my experience goes. So that she was a woman wasn't surprising. That she played trombone, yes, was surprising. And like really cool. But I didn't really think of it at the time. It's just like that was her instrument, and that was like kind of cool. And she gave me lessons from the beginning, which was really neat. And then once I got into, I think, 7th grade, I started lessons with another teacher. And
I didn't really think a whole lot of it. I was always just sort of like one of the only girls playing trombone, and it just wasn't anything that I really thought of. Just always hanging out with boys, and that was like totally fine with me. But then I remember this was a really, really important thing that I very distinctly remember that happened the summer after my freshman year of college. So I was at Ithaca, and we hosted the International Trombone Festival that summer. And I didn't even know what the ITF was. It was like all new to me. Really exciting. And I remember that Movie Conda played, and she's the principal in Milwaukee, and she's also a rather petite person. We found out this summer she's a little tiny bit taller than me. Yeah, I was hoping I was taller, but no, she's a little taller than me. Anyways, I saw her play though at the ITF, and I realized I'd never seen a professional female trombonist up until that point. Never. And it was like it framed things in a new way for me. That it suddenly just seemed like it was so much more of a possibility for me to become a professional player when, seeing her and it's, just seeing her and play, and she's amazing too. She's just incredible. She's a beautiful player, and just so strong. And it was just this moment where I was like, I didn't even know that I was sort of missing that element of not really having a role model that I really thought that it's like, oh, there are these great players. And there's Joe Leslie and there's Christian Lindbergh and all these, big people, but I'll never be like them. And then seeing her just suddenly, it made me realize that there are, I mean, like I was saying, that it was something that I could do. There's a possibility for me. So I think, representation is so, so important.
Do you think it's changed?
Yes. I do feel a greater sense of importance and urgency also around, not just encouraging more, women to play trombone, but just greater diversity in the brass world in general, and making sure that representation is there for all kinds of people. I've been involved with the International Women's Brass Conference in the last 4 years-ish or so. And that was also an organization that I didn't know existed when I was a student. And man, if I had known that had been around, I think that would have been really something that would have perhaps encouraged me a lot more. Especially, there are times when you're just, need people that understand you in that way to help support you, because they understand your experience in a way that others can't. And so the International Women's Brass Conference, I think, is something that is really valuable and important. And they have initiatives recently that they've started. Like, there's a mentorship program that they've been doing for the last couple of years, and I've been a mentor in that. And working with younger female brass players who are in college, I think having somebody to talk to and relate to and just ask advice of is really important. I've played in the last couple of years a few times with the Athena brass band, which is an all-women or all-female brass band, and that's been a really great experience as well, because just seeing these incredible players and this sort of camaraderie and again support that you have is just a little bit different when you all have more similar experiences and can sort of relate to each other in a closer way. So yeah, I do think that there are initiatives and there are more people speaking out and more people calling out. I see, especially, social media is changing, and it's a pretty important force in our world now. And things that are not okay are being called out much more publicly rather than sort of being hidden or kept within, a university or a particular institution. And I think that's very important for people to see that and know that. And sort of the Me Too movement, I think was part of that, or the way the music world is kind of going through that is sort of how it relates to how the Me Too movement sort of went through that. And so, there are people who are strong voices for rights, people who are underrepresented or who need their voices elevated, because it's certainly important, and I think it's not only important for us to see the amazing people out there who are doing great work as players and teachers and role models that are that offer different voices and have something else to say than the traditional brass world, which is overwhelmingly still pretty much white men. Nothing wrong with white men, but we just need more voices, to create just a more rich and reflective, musical representation of what the human experience is.
Right, I've read a lot lately about the orchestra world, but that's not my world. So, but I would say in the jazz world, you see kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But that's really cool that you're aware of it and you're being a positive role model. I'm sure you have students right here. What ages do you teach now?
So I'm at Texas A&M in Commerce, and our studio is about 24 students. They're all undergraduates, so 18 to 24. There are a couple of older students that have taken a little bit of a different path. So everybody, but most people are that typical undergraduate age, 18 to 22, and it's still dominant, majority male studio. That's just part of what it is going to be. The ratio of boys to girls that start trombone. It's just there are always just more boys that start. So by the time you get to university, that's still there. But again, that's where that representation matters. So just more girls are starting trombone. But yeah, so they're all undergrads at the university right now. Yeah, but we have a pretty good studio rolling along, and I'm really happy to be there.
One thing I was listening to of your recital that I can't quite remember, but I was listening to your phrasing, beautiful. Your playing was great, obviously. One thing I wanted to ask about was vibrato or there were times when you would hold the note without it, and then there were times when you would finish a note with vibrato, and I just wondered if that's part of the music or if that is a style decision that you made of your interpretation or what's your interpretation for that?
So I think vibrato is just another expressive tool that we have in our toolbox. Most of the time, in solo literature, it's not marked. Occasionally, a composer will specifically put in vibrato, or sometimes specifically put in non-vibrato if they have a particular sound in mind. But generally, I just think of it like an expressive tool, like dynamics or tone color or articulation, and so that's I think how I see it, and so it just depends on the phrase. It depends on what I want to say. It depends on are we creating tension, releasing tension. It just is a sort of a musical in the moment. But it's thought out most of the time. It's planned. Sometimes more deliberately. Sometimes it's just sort of it's more of a natural. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering if you could play for this piece.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking, I want to try to get a free lesson, but the first thing that I noticed with this piece is these octave leaps. And the reading lesson. I immediately was faced with the challenge of leaping octaves. Is that just me, or is that part of you?
I think it's hard for everybody.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things that need to happen to make that work. By the way, I think what we should do actually is maybe end this session and then rejoin again, so that way we can restart with the playing and not run out of time on this session.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so do I,
weeks
Okay.
and see if I can get better.
The process.
I feel like I want to show people that, if you know what you're trying to do, you can get better at it.
Yeah.
And so I love the sound of this piece, Flight of the Feather.
Yeah. So one of the things I had mentioned that in my undergrad, with Hal Reynolds, we always played duets, and we would do these Paterson duets, and some of the tenor and bass ones are a lot of what we would do, and they all have silly names, and so that was one of the things that he always had a joke around. So like one of them is called some of them are called like a hog in the fog and the peanut butterfly, and it's the sausage. A Viennese waltz. So I don't know what is up with Paterson and his titles for these, but that's part of the reason why I have a sort of fondness for these duets, is doing them with Hal. But yeah, they're challenging, and yeah, the octave leaps are challenging, and I think it's just because there's so many things that have to coordinate. When we're doing these, as far as like air shifting and air direction and air size and air speed, and it's a lot to happen in a very quick amount of time.
Are you thinking all of that when you're playing, or
No, that's why I work on fundamentals, so
Yes.
I can think about it when I'm doing my fundamentals. So I practice octaves when I'm doing my fundamentals, and then when they come up in a piece or something, then I'm like, oh, I know, like I kind of think of like it almost like you have settings, like a mixing board for every note, and all the dynamic levels and all the articulations at which you're going to do that note, and so it just is like your brain says, I want to do this note at this dynamic level, and then just boom, it's like it can happen. So that way I don't have to think when I'm playing. The less I can think when I'm playing about how to play, the better, because I want to be thinking about what I'm playing and like singing it in my head and just hearing it, and not actually like thinking about the mechanics of playing. Yeah.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. In the spirit of improvement, we can play through it now, and then I'm going to practice it for a week, and we'll get back together again and see where we're at then. How about that?
You tell me about how fast you want to go.
So I was thinking.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean it's. I think it's supposed to be a very slow. 9/8.
I'd love to play it slower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
That would be
7.
great.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be slow. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right.
So, and do you want the top line or the bottom?
I'll take the top.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. I'm gonna adjust my gain a little bit here for playing. So let me play a couple of notes and you tell me how it is.
Okay. That sounds pretty good.
Okay.
I think I'll do that too, right? Because maybe that's a smart move. Check 1, 2, and let's see here. Well, there it is. Okay. Can you still hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just turned myself down a little bit. And, okay, let's give this a shot. And this is Flight of the Feather. And you want to count us in?
Sure.
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 7,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Cool.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I think I know what to work on. And we'll regroup maybe in a week.
Yeah.
But
We'll be in touch.
yeah, well, thank you so much, Megan.
Absolutely.
Boutin. This is Trombone Is Enough, and I really want to thank you for being my guest this week.